Good morning. It's good to be with you this morning, and good to be in this place. And I'm glad that you chose to be here. If you're watching online, we're really glad that you're here. We are this morning for our teaching time looking in the book of Revelation. Almost finished working through the 7 letters to 7 churches, asking ourselves how we become a beautiful presence in the world. And today we get to Revelation chapter 3, verses 7 to 13. If you have your Bible or your device, you could open it up at this time, and I'll put it on the screen here. Let's read the letter to the church in Philadelphia. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, "These are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have, so that no one will take your crown. The one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. I will write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God, and I will also write on them my new name. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches." This is God's word. Well, the book of Revelation came to Christians and Christian churches at the beginning of what would be a major persecution. And by the time of Emperor Trajan, which was about 98 to 117 AD, it was actually by then illegal to be a Christian. If anyone was accused of being a Christian, they were brought before the proconsul and they were asked if they were Christians. And if they said yes, then they were asked to curse Christ and worship the emperor. If they did, they would be spared. But if they did not, they would be tortured and executed. So the book of Revelation, I don't know what you think when you read it, but the book of Revelation was written to Christians who were in that situation. The simple fact of history is that based on the book of Revelations, these Christians who were facing this, the book actually did its job. If you look through history, history tells us that actually it did prepare the Christians, the readers in these churches, to actually face the persecution that was coming. And so Jesus gave this book to his people to read it, and the truths in the book, when they took them into their hearts, it made them become a people who were able to endure some terrible things. And so we read in this passage to the church in Philadelphia, in verse 10, a particular kind of commendation. And he commends this church. He says in verse 8, "You have kept my word, you have not denied my name." And then this line in verse 10, because you have kept my command, you have endured patiently, or you have kept my word of endurance. You have kept my command to endure patiently. That's what this church was about, enduring patiently. And the word endurance there is translated endure patiently, you can see, is actually a pretty cool word. It's a great word in the original language. You actually say it like this. You say it hupomeno. Just try it out. Come on, just try it. It's a cool word to say. Hupomeno. Hupo basically means hyper, and meno means to stand or to stand up underneath. And so it's a great word, hupomeno. Meno means to stay. So it means you're going to hyper stay. You're going to hyper stand no matter what comes. You're going to stay faithful. You're going to stay standing. So look at yourself today. Look at the troubles that you have. Look at the things that you're worried about, or think about the pain that's going on in your life. How do you deal with it? Do you crumble? Do you give in? Do you run? Do you go and try to escape? Or do you hupomeno? Do you hyperstand in it? This is what the book of Revelation can actually deliver to people the ability to stand. We know this historically. We know this has happened. You can read your history books about what the Romans did to the Christians. The Romans were amazed that the Christians would get up in front of one governor after another and say, we will not bow our knee because Jesus is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And then they would be put to death. And they would say, thanks be to God. Wow. And the Romans couldn't believe it. The Romans could not believe the calmness in which Christians, the lack of bitterness in which Christians would face something like that. What I'm trying to say is that the book of Revelation is extremely practical. It's extremely practical. If Jesus could Meno the cross and endure under it, under the face of torture, and if the people who came to understand his teaching got that same ability, how are we doing? Jesus hyperstood the cross. Peter hyperstood execution. Anybody who took these truths into their heart were able to hyperstand. They were able to endure. They were able to carry on. They were able to not give in. How are you doing? I can't even Meno a diet. Can you hyperstand against peer pressure? Man, I can't even hyperstay or stand against a cold. Some of you, maybe you're here this morning and you're crumbling. And you just feel it. Your faith, the way that you're walking through life, you don't have a lot of durability. Do you want to become a person of durability, of patient endurance? It tells you in this passage how to do it, how to become that kind of person. This letter enabled people to do that. So whatever you're facing this week, it's probably not what they faced. You're not probably going to have your toes cut off, covered in pitch, and lit on fire. You're probably not going to have your head cut off. But what he gave them in this letter enabled them to do that. And so if we grasp it, it will enable us to hyperstand as well. So you say, how do I do this, Steve? That sounds like quite an intro. How do I hyperstand? How do I become this kind of person? Well, I want to suggest to you that in this passage of Scripture, there's 3 symbols about 3 truths about how to become a person of endurance. How to Meno. The 3 are this. They're a door, a pillar, and an address. The door has to do with being able to stand when suffering comes. The pillar has to do with the kind of security that we have when we face uncertainty. And the address has to do with our identity. So they took these 3 truths into their hearts. Let's do the same. The first one, a door. He says this way, what Jesus opens, no one can shut. And what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds, he says. I placed before you an open door that nobody can shut. Placed before you an open door that no one can shut because you have patiently endured. Because you have Meno. There's an open door that nobody can shut. Which teaches us a very significant truth that, friends, you need this. It teaches us that Christians, followers of Jesus, can suffer with purpose. Our sufferings are not meaningless. You need this truth if you want the ability to stand. In the New Testament, an open door almost always refers to an opportunity for the success of the Christian message, or a chance for the message of Jesus to be spread, to be successful in somebody's heart or in a community. In other words, an open door is an opportunity for the kingdom of heaven to come to earth. Okay? That's what happens when you have an open door. In other words, God's reign or God's kingdom comes in these open doors. Now, for this church, what were the closed doors? Well, he goes through them, he lists them. He says, the first is this. Obviously, you've had a closed door of strength. You have very little strength, he says. I know your deeds, and you have little strength. You're a puny group. You're kind of wimpy. You don't have a lot of numbers. You don't have a lot of influence. You don't have a lot of dollars. It seems like there's a closed door. You don't have the resources. He says the other thing you don't have is you're alienated and you're slandered by the synagogue of people who say that they're Jews, but they're not. Likely, you're being excluded from the teachings in the synagogue is what's happening. So you're excluded and you don't have a lot of strength. Those are closed doors to you. He says also, you've been facing this persecution that you've been holding up under, this persecution of emperor worship. So there's got all these closed doors in their culture. We've talked before about trade guilds and how if you were followers of Jesus, you often would have closed economic doors. And Jesus says, in the face of these closed doors, you have hung on. You've hupomenoed. And he says this, because you've hupomenoed, because you've stayed faithful in all of these closed doors, I am going to open a door for you. Put it this way, the way that you handle closed doors will open doors. So the reason that you're going to overcome, Jesus is saying, is your enemies are actually going to come. Your enemies are actually going to bow down and say that, yeah, Jesus did love you. The reason that these doors will be open is because of the way that you've handled the closed doors in your life. Verse 10 says, you patiently endured, you hyperstood. We don't know what they patiently endured, but basically, when doors are closed, when God closes doors, whether those doors are career or health or relationship, you could put it this way, suffering in our lives is closed doors. You expect it to be this far by this time in your life, in your career or your relationships. You expect it to be making more money. You expect it to have more friends, more joy, more peace, you expect it to be married. You expect it to have children. Closed doors are the things in our lives that make us suffer, that hurt. And Jesus is saying, because you have been patient, because you have handled your closed doors, you've hupomenoed, I will now open other doors. It's remarkable. He's saying that our suffering is never for nothing. If you handle suffering properly, closed doors properly, it will turn you into great people who can open other doors. If you handle closed doors right, I will use those closed doors in your life to enable you to open other ones. Did you follow that? So what are the closed doors for you today? Maybe that failure in front of you. If you handle it properly, it will turn you into somebody who will succeed in some other way that without that failure, you could never succeed. The way that you handle closed doors will turn you into the kind of people, the kind of person that can be used in other ways by God. This is tremendously profound. Suffering has no meaning for animals. On the farm, I remember many times, if an animal was suffering, the most merciful thing you could do is put it down. It makes life pointless for animals. But humans are different, aren't they? Humans are different. If you go to the greatest art galleries in the world, or you listen to the greatest music in this world, you begin to realize that suffering in the life of an artist is what makes them more rich and wise and deep and profound. On a minuscule level, that explains Taylor Swift's career. Every breakup is another hit record. Why? Suffering turns them into something beautiful. Suffering can make you more human. Let me put it another way. Closed doors in your life, you can probably think of one right now. Closed doors can enrich you and educate you and be extremely meaningful. It can make you the kind of person that can walk through all kinds of open doors that you could not have walked through otherwise. You can trace, almost all of us can trace some good thing in our life back to a closed door. You become who you will be based on how you handle your pain, how you handle your suffering. Hold fast. When those closed doors are there, hold fast, and it will open new doors. It will transform suffering. The first century church is tremendously persecuted. The spread of Christianity seems like it's a closed door, and yet, in their persecution, Christianity spreads more rapidly than it ever had in history. And that closed door, because of persecution, now led to open doors that you walked through to get into this church service this morning. I'm a pastor because of a closed door. I thought that I would move up the ladder in a carpet laying company. But after 3 days and 2 sliced fingers, the boss called me in and slammed the door shut. At which point, I got a call from a church a couple hours away that said, hey, we're looking for an intern. You want to be our summer intern? I said, well, that door got slammed, so I got nothing else to do. And I'm still here. My wife and I received a closed door when our first son died. You think that's a closed door, man? That's how do you endure? How do you stand up under that with your faith? By God's grace, we did. The door was closed. I now look back, almost 25 years later, and I think of and I bring to mind the dozens of people that we have been able to help. I think of the hundreds of people that I've been able to have compassion for. Hundreds of open doors. I think of the gift it's been to my life to treasure each moment. It's a remarkable view of suffering that things that are put into the furnace can be shaped and refined and purified and even beautified. It's a remarkable view of suffering that if you face it and you endure it with faith, if you Meno, it can in the end make us better and stronger and more filled with greatness and joy. That even the worst that the world can do, God can transform that into open doors where his kingdom can come to earth as it is in heaven. Hold on to the one who can open the doors and close the doors. Hold on, and your suffering can actually be changed. Your closed doors will become open doors for the gospel and your character. It's a fascinating truth. And if you get it, you can stand. It also means this: if you get it, then you have to learn we can't judge too soon about what life is like and what is a blessing and what is a curse and what is open and what is closed. Right? Don't judge too soon. One of my favorite stories, I like to tell it anyways, told my kids, told the staff here a few times, is actually a story about an old man. It's a Brazilian fable. It's about an old man and a horse. Some of you, this is all you're going to get from the sermon, so I understand that. The story goes like this. There's an old man, and he has a beautiful horse, and he's desperately poor. He's a woodcutter. He has no money, but he has a beautiful horse. Everybody wants the horse. The king wants the horse. It's beautiful. It's majestic. It's worth thousands of dollars. It could immediately rescue him from poverty. Everyone says, sell the horse, sell the horse. He says, no, I can't sell the horse. It's like a person to me. I refuse to sell it, even though they offered him fabulous prices for this horse. And then one morning, he wakes up, and the horse is not in his stable. And the horse has wandered off and disappeared. And all the villagers come to him and say, oh, you fool, you stupid old man. We told you someone was going to steal your horse. The horse is gone. You should have sold it. You've been cursed. And the old man says, don't speak too quickly. Just say that the horse isn't in the stable. That's all we know. I don't know if I've been cursed or not. How can you judge? All we got is a fragment. The people of the village just scoffed at him. Well, a couple weeks go by. The horse comes back. He hadn't been stolen. He had just gone away into the forest, and not only had he returned with a dozen more horses just as beautiful as his. And the villager says, oh, you were right. You're so wise. You were right. We were wrong. You've been blessed. We thought it was a curse, but it's a blessing. Forgive us. The old man says, you've gone too far. You know, all we know is that the horse is back. How do we know if it's a blessing or a curse? Well, the old man had one son, and that one son began to break these wild horses that the other horse had brought back. And after a few days, he fell from one of the horses and broke his leg. Well, the people came to him, and the villager said, you know what? These dozen horses were a curse. They were a curse. You had one son to help you out, and now you have no son. You have to help him out. These were a curse. The man says, you only know a fragment. How dare you judge too soon? Well, days go by, and the entire countryside goes into war. And there's a big war, and all of the young men of all of the villagers had to go into the army. They were forced into the army, except the one son of the old man. He was excluded because he was injured, and the villagers came with tears in their eyes, and they said, your son's accident was a blessing. You know, his legs are broken, but at least he's with you. He'll heal. Our sons are gone forever. The old man puts his head in his hands and says, you people, it's impossible to talk to you. Nobody knows if it's a blessing or curse. No one is wise enough to know. Only God knows. Do you see? What's going on in your life? Blessing or curse? It's too early to tell. Only God knows. Only God knows. Because closed doors and open doors are in his hands. They're in his hands. Second image we get. The first is a door that is open. The closed doors, you hypomeno, and you will see the open door. Secondly, he says, not only that, to the one who is victorious, I will make you a pillar in the temple of my God, and never again will you leave it. And the idea is that you will be a pillar inside of a temple. You will be strong inside of a fortress. So that's the picture that we got here. So the region of this world was marked by earthquakes. And so every time that the ground would shake and you would go through an earthquake, the whole city, in fact, was nearly destroyed in AD 17 and had to be rebuilt. And from then on, people in Philadelphia lived in fear of earthquakes, understandably so. And so every time an aftershock would hit or a little tremor would come, people would run outside of buildings. They would run outside to the countryside, and the pillars would begin to sway in the buildings, and if the pillars fell, the entire building would fall, and it would soon collapse, and that's a terrible way to go, terrible way to die. And so they were terrified of this, and Jesus is saying, I will make you a pillar, and you're not going to have to run out of the temple anymore, because the temple is going to be the temple of God. And so the picture here is stability, security, prominence, honor. In a world of fear, there is safety here. He's saying, I will keep you from the hour of trial that's going to come, he says a little bit later, when the whole earth is going to go through something that's going to test its inhabitants. In other words, you don't have to worry. I'm going to keep you from that. I'm going to make you a pillar in the temple of God. Worry, of course, anytime you worry, it's about the future, right? Insurance companies make their money on our fears of the future. Jesus says, hold on. I'm going to keep you. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to keep you safe. In a world where everything is shaking, I'm going to make you secure. Even in the world to come, I will keep you a pillar in the fortress. I couldn't help but think of one of my favorite Psalms as I read this and pondered the image of being a pillar in a fortress. Psalm 46 puts it like this, just for all of our fears, would you bring your fears up and just let them encounter the burning bush that is Psalm 46? God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fail. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in an uproar. Sound familiar? Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice and the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. What he's saying is, if you are connected to that, there is security for the deepest part of you, for your soul. And that's what you long for, friends. Everybody in this room longs for your soul to be safe and secure. And your healthy body will not make you secure, and your bank account will not make you secure, and your insurance policy will not make you secure. Your reputation will not keep you secure. You long for your soul to be safe, to be a pillar. So stay standing and hold on, Jesus says, because your soul is safe. And the longer you hold on, the more precious and real that will become to you. pillar in the fortress, in the temple of our God. And then lastly, I will write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God, and I will also write on them my new name. Now, this is interesting. He's basically saying, hold fast, hyperstand, and you will know who you are and where you belong. He says, if the open door transforms your suffering and if the pillar transforms your sense of security, this image of a new address transforms your sense of who you are. The city actually of Philadelphia had many name changes throughout its time, which is kind of weird. After the earthquake decimated the place, Tiberius Caesar gave them some money to rebuild their city, and so to thank Caesar, they actually renamed the whole city. Not just a street, like the whole thing. They called it Neo Caesarea, or the new city of Caesar. But that didn't last very long. I guess the new became old, and they went back to Philadelphia. And then a little while later, they changed their city's name to Flavia. And that didn't last very long, so they changed it back to Philadelphia. Kind of like identity whiplash, like, where do you live? Where do we live? I'm not sure, honey. Where do we live? And Jesus is saying this. It's a pretty cool image. My name will be on you. There's some permanency there. This will be, my name will be on you forever. I'm going to give you a new identity. This is, identity is a big topic these days. And the question is, who am I? Like, who am I, and how do I get my sense of self? If you're like me, you probably wear a lot of hats. You wear different ideas of who you are. I'm a pastor, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a coach, I have all these tasks, I wear all these hats, I have all these responsibilities. Well, who am I? Psychologists would say that actually our sense of who we are comes from our memories. And our memories have 3 dimensions to them. I don't know if you've thought about this. But psychologists would tell us that when you try to think about who you are as a man or a woman, there's 3 aspects to it. One is you look back and you think of the content, the thing that actually happened. Maybe when you were little, you remember a way that you remember that it happened. Doesn't mean it happened that way, of course, but that's how you remember it. Okay, you remember being around the kitchen table, or you remember how your parents or your mom or your dad or your coaches or whoever interacted with you. You remember what was actually happening, kind of with your mind. But also, the other thing that happens when you think of memory is that you also have an emotion. And so oftentimes the things that we recall are because they had an emotional impact. So you think back to maybe you were called stupid, or maybe you were called brilliant back when you were a kid, and you had an emotion that went with it. So there's the content, and then there's emotion. And here's the other part that goes with all of our memories. You have the content of what happened, you have the feeling of what you felt when it happened, and thirdly, you have some identity formation that took place. Because that thing happened and you felt that way, now you thought of yourself in a certain way. I am somebody who. I remember scoring the winning goal. I remember the emotions of pride and joy. And I realized I am someone who is fantastic at hockey. That's who I am. That's part of my identity. Do you see? All of our memories have those 3 components to them. And so, I'm a failure, I'm a success, I'm beautiful, I'm average, I'm stupid, I'm unlovable, I'm not enough, I'm unrealized potential. All of the sense of who you are comes from those 3 things when you look back at your past. And you didn't even know that you were doing it. You didn't even know that you were doing it. You were just going about the things that you do. So who you are is formed by what you remember. It's formed by, let me put it this way, it's formed by your record of who you are. What happened? How did you feel? You automatically assign some identity factors to that. So those 3 things happened in your past. Listen, Jesus is saying this. Your identity, now, if you follow Jesus, your identity is covered in mine. You believed that you were shaped by what you did based on what you did and how you felt about it. But now, it's different. You, before you came to know Jesus, yourself was formed by your history, your record, your emotions, your self-identifying voices. I'm a person who.
But now things are different, Jesus is saying. Your identity is not based on your record. Your identity is based on his record at the cross. And what is his record? It's a lot better than yours. Mine too. Sinless perfection, complete obedience. And what's the emotion? The emotion is the heart of the Father. Complete acceptance, wonderful joy, unconditional love. He's saying, my name is upon you. My record is upon you. Imagine if that's who you were. On the final day, you have his name upon you. What does he see? Sinless perfection. Woo. How do you feel about that? Unconditional joy and love. Do you see? Now, in heaven, nothing hangs over you. Everybody will be on a clean page. We will be named and claimed. It's the power to name is the power of ownership. The old names won't matter anymore. You're not a doctor, you're not a lawyer, you're not unemployed, you're not a mother, you're not a professional, you're not a coach, you're not a teacher. All those names don't matter. Neither do those other names. Felon, failure, hated, abandoned, humiliated, betrayed, unappreciated, liar, adulterer, divorced, addicted. Or as one theologian says, what a staggering truth that the God of the whole universe would say, mine, about sinners like you and me. Not only that, you got a new name based on his record, not yours, new identity. You also got a new address. You got a new address. New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. He describes it later in Revelation 21. But just let me remind you of this. Why is it that you don't feel well this morning, or you're discouraged, or your body aches? Why do your knees hurt and your back hurt and you have a headache? Why do things never seem to work out in your relationships? I'll tell you why. Why is there cancer? Why is there diabetes? Why are there hospitals and graveyards? It's because we aren't home yet. And Jesus is saying, hyperstand. Hold on. You will be soon. New address, new name. Anybody know this picture? Ben-Hur is a classic movie, Charlton Heston. And he had to learn how to drive a chariot for this big race scene. And according to the people who look back at this movie, he was actually not very good at it. I mean, I don't blame him. Trying to drive 4 horses like that is really tricky. And he felt like he could hardly make it around the track with these horses and keep them in control. And finally, he was able to make it around the track. And the producer, Cecil DeMille, he was the producer, and he said, listen, he said to DeMille, he said, I can drive this chariot, but I don't think I can win the race. And DeMille looked at him and said this, you just stay in the race, and I'll make sure you win. I just want to encourage you, friends. I think that's Jesus' word to us today. You stay in the race. You stand firm, right? You stand fast. You stay at your post. You leave the rest to me. I'll see that you win. And I'll see that you get saved. I see that you get to the end. So, 3 images. Listen. You are going to do something with the closed doors in your life. And some of you are looking at some this morning. And the invitation today is hold on to the one who holds the keys to the doors. And listen, you're going to do something with the fears in your life. You're going to go somewhere for security. You already are. You're going to go somewhere for security in this lifetime. Hold on to the one who will make you a pillar in the fortress of our God. And God knows we are all going to struggle with identity. Come to him. He has a name for you. He has an address for you. Do you see? To hyperstand means that we let go and give in and give up to the one who can transform our suffering and our security and our identity. And get this, when you hold on to him, what you discover is he's been holding on to you. Hold on, because he held on. In Hebrews chapter 12, this exact word is used. The exact same word, hupomeno, is used in Hebrews chapter 12 to describe Jesus on the cross. He hupomenoed the cross. He faced the pain. He faced the suffering. He faced the trouble. He hyperstood so that you and I can follow in his steps and do the same.